back into technology with Gethin Ellis and Mark Williams. Welcome to the 8th episode of the PHIT Podcast. Here at gethinellis.com, whilst we know physical fitness is essential, our mental health is vital too, and our PHIT Podcast is all about putting the human back into technology. One thing we can probably all agree on is the last year or so has been unprecedented, so we wanted to seek out the views of technology leaders, business owners, consultants and many others from a range of different businesses and organisations to discuss with them the impacts on their business, on their humans and on their technology, and see how they see the future unfolding. So without further ado, I'll introduce you to episode 8 where we speak to Edwin Sarmiento.
Welcome everybody to the 8th edition of the Putting the Human Back into Technology podcast. This week Mark and I are joined by Edwin Sarmiento. I hope I said that right, Edwin. I hope you got your last name right. Edwin is he's the first non-UK resident on guest on our show, which is quite interesting for us today. Edwin's based over in Canada. So just to kick things off, Edwin, just tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, what your business is, and so on, your job role, things like that.
Thank you. I first caught up with some of your posts on LinkedIn, and the title caught my attention, putting humans back in technology. And for me, that's the real gist of what technology really is about. Most people focus on the tech. I focus on the people. And a little bit of an introduction. I'm an independent consultant. I focus on high availability and disaster recovery solutions. On-premises, Azure, so talk about, the SQL Server, HADR stuff. I also focus on the DevOps side of things where you're containerizing SQL Server, but a lot of people think, oh yeah, you're a hardcore guy, techie guy. But what people don't realize is that I focus more on the people side of tech, even when things are like, they seem more techie. People would get you on board as a consultant and they all talk about the tech part. I don't talk about the tech part. The tech part's easy. The human part of it, the people part of it is where a lot of people struggle. And that's what I really focus on. That's kind of like a quick introduction of what I do.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you very much.
I'm already gonna go off track. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Here in the UK, I think it's fair to say that guys and girls involved in technology are probably less focused on the communication aspects. Let's call it that for now, rather than the wider people aspect. We'll talk about communication. But it always strikes me when speaking to people from across the pond, so to speak, from where we are, that you guys and girls are always seem to be more confident and comfortable dealing with people. Is that just my perception of your level of confidence, if you like, in dealing with people? And I don't know what experience you've had dealing with people in the UK, but are they all like you, Edwin? Because you already are coming across as really easy to talk to, and a really clear communication point, and that's something which I'm looking at. Again, I'm not going to mention any names here in the UK, but I'm thinking, okay, that's not the same as the UK, right? That's different.
I think it's I find it interesting you mentioned that, because for one, I'm Asian. And when you think about the cultural aspects of the differences between North America, Europe, and Asia Pacific, most Asians are not like me. And I'm an introvert. I tell people all the time, I would rather hunker down on my computer, do the stuff that I really love to do. And what I've realized is when you really understand the whole gist of it, technology would evolve, it would change. But the one thing that stays the same is how we humans and how we people interact. I mean, it's interesting because with the whole pandemic, people are now forced to work from home and meet using Teams and Zoom and stuff like that. And, people like me, the introverts, were thinking, oh, this is kind of like a dream come true for me. I'll be at home. I don't have to talk to the salespeople. I don't have to talk to the marketing people. I'll do what I do best, write code, deal with all of these configuration settings, and not talk to them. Next thing you know, 6 months down the road, people are saying, when can I get back to the office? When can I get back to the office? we need to understand that, unless we embrace the humanity within us, technology and AI would easily replace what we do. And so even people like, introverts like me, who's born and raised in a culture where, even speaking up is a challenge. I had to force myself into learning all of these things because that's the only way that I can influence people into changing their way of thinking. And with the nature of what I do, it's really all about changing the way they're thinking. When you think about it, who wakes up at 3 o'clock in the morning and say, I need a high availability solution? Nobody. Yeah.
So that probably segues into the question I should have asked, really, which is, so how has, well, we say how has the last year, but it's, it's getting on for 17, 18 months now, isn't it, in reality? But how has the last year or so, impacted what you do? Obviously, you're an independent consultant, so you're not dissimilar to what Gethin and I do, ourselves. Mm-hmm. You're not, you're not, Marbell or whatever. You're yourself and maybe a couple of associates, I guess. But how has things impacted you? How has your business been impacted over the last year or so?
Well, just like most of the businesses, mine has been really affected. The fact that I travel a lot for work, which is kind of ironic when you think about it. You're in tech, you should be working from home most of the time. In fact, the work from home thing is something that I've been doing since 2007. I've been working from home on and off. Kids are homeschooled, so no big deal, right? This has been our lifestyle for the past 10, 13 years now. But what really changed was the fact that because nobody could travel. In fact, we were stuck in the Philippines for 4 months.
Oh, wow.
Started what's supposed to be a 4-week vacation. I was supposed to fly to the UK to do sequel bits. And then middle of March, things went south and I had to cancel everything. And because I travel a lot for work, my business has definitely been affected. But because I'm also working with technology, right? It's easy to switch to just doing everything online. More meetings online, more communications online, like these kinds of things. Like we live now, today, we live in, the 4 corners of our Teams, our Zoom and our GoToMeeting sessions. Yeah. So the business has definitely been affected, but what I saw has really changed the way I do things. I've always wanted to do coaching for tech professionals, mainly because I saw the trend where when I get brought in as a consultant, I see people are struggling, not because they can't do the work. Typically when a consultant gets brought in, it's because they don't have the skills, they don't have, the expertise. They would bring in a consultant. But in my case, I saw that they were bringing me in not because they can't do the work. It's because they're so tired and exhausted that they can't do anything else. Like 2 or 3 of my clients from last year, they brought me in. They were deploying a SQL Server availability groups on Azure. And the guy leading the project was really smart. He's the lead cloud engineer. And, 3 or 4 months into the pandemic, he hasn't even had time to slow down and just think about what's going on. And the whole pandemic has made a lot of people rethink their priorities. But in our case, people working in tech, it's even a lot worse because, the lifestyle, the culture that we built into working in tech, 60 plus hour weeks, that's normal, right? And we've accepted that as normal. I mean, I tell people I'm a recovering workaholic. We've accepted working 60 plus hour weeks normal. But then it blew my mind that my clients were working 80 plus hour weeks. I mean, come on. People are so exhausted, they're so tired that it's no longer a conversation about can you do this? It's about can you still do what you need to do, to a point where, again, 2 or 3 of my clients brought me in last year, not because they can't do the work. It's just that they're tapped so exhausted that they can't do anything.
Yeah, if they're doing 80 hours a week, those 80 hours are probably not the most productive weeks, because there's certainly a tipping point that there's pointless doing any more because you're not doing anything actually constructive or productive. I fully agree with them. I fully agree with that. So if they are doing 80-hour weeks and you're not getting 80 hours worth of productivity, you may as well have 20 good hours of productivity and have the other 60 where you get your work-life balance. That's my kind of feel on it, as someone who works 60 hours a week regularly.
I was going to say.
So it's very much a do as I say, not as I do approach. But even with the hours that I do feel there's a point where you just may as well stop, because you're not doing anything. You're not actually doing anything productive or constructive, and with the time. So well, that's a really good insight there, Edwin, and how it's impacted your business is obviously same as that. Well, it sounds like you've had a sort of similar experience to us. There's been still lots of work to do despite the pandemic, and I'm going to ask this question because it's the next one in the list. But I think you've probably addressed some of this anyway. The question is, how do people fit into your sort of delivery model? And I guess they're right up front and center from what you said, but I'll let you elaborate and expand on that.
Picking up on what you just said, interestingly, people are at the center of what I do. I remember a couple of years ago, a SaaS company based out of Vermont in the United States reached out to me. They wanted me to do a configuration check of their high availability system. And it's interesting because I can do what I need to do anywhere in the world. I don't need to come there, right? But during our conversations, there's just something about the tone of how they say things that made me feel like I need to be there. And so I said, look, I don't need to be there to do what I need to do, but I feel like I need to be there in order to get your real issues dealt with. Mm-hmm. And so I said, I want to pay you a visit. I want to talk to your team. I want to, get a sense of what really is going on. And the way I look at what I do is that, every technical problem is really a people problem underneath. We just don't want to look at it. It's mostly tech, because that's how we were trained as tech people. We are trained to look at the tech problems the way they are. I see it differently. Every single tech problem out there is first and foremost a people problem. And so I ended up visiting them, again, they brought me in. They want me to evaluate their SQL Server always on availability group. But 40 minutes into the conversation, I said, look, you don't really have a SQL Server problem. You have a communications problem. Mm. And, one guy was saying, what do you mean? Well, your developers are not talking to the sysadmins. Your sysadmins are not talking to your DBAs. Your DBAs are not talking to your network guys. And you're wondering why your operational procedures are so messed up?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've got very similar experiences with pretty much every client I've ever had. There's usually it's not the tech that's the problem, even though you're brought in to fix a technical problem. Is this, and this is kind of how we've got to where we've got to, and why I know do quite a lot of work with Mark and various other things, and why this podcast has started, because sounds like you've got similar experiences to us with people being the ones you need to take care of. And Mark's has frozen. Your screen froze there, mate. It looked like you were you'd either fallen asleep or I needed to call an ambulance for you.
I haven't fallen asleep, but I was scrolling to find out what the next question was, and because I have a question I'd quite like to ask, which isn't the next question in the list.
Oh, go for it, mate. I think
we got the title of the of this particular podcast.
Mark,
what I wanted to ask you was going back to. Am I still here?
Yeah, I can hear you again. So what you were saying? You think we've got the title, and then I think you said it, but I don't think I heard it.
Oh, the title is what Edwin was talking about, being a communication problem underneath, the people problem underneath the technology. Yeah. So we'll probably go with that maybe. But what I wanted to ask you, Edwin, is given what we were talking about in the previous questions about people being the focus of things and center. You had to go to site there to find that problem out, that people problem out. So how maybe it's a question about as much as going forwards as about the last year. How do you see or how have you experienced the remote aspect of working to help or hinder being able to get at the heart of the problem? Just using the example that you quoted there about not joining up the dots on the communications side.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting that you asked that question because, again, working from home since 2007, you pick up some skills, you learn a few things. And, as a data professional myself, you see patterns. You connect the dots. And it's that data, right? For me, it's no longer just about talking to people on Skype, on Teams, on GoToMeeting, on Zoom. It's about looking for or even listening to what they're really saying and connecting the dots. Because here's the thing. We have been trained to listen to data, facts, because we're logical people. Tech people are highly logical. So we've been trained to listen to facts, data, right? And we rationalize things based on facts and data. I'll give you a very simple example. Performance tuning. People are saying, yeah, I have performance issues. Yeah, give me the data. And we kind of work around the data so that we can make the decisions that we need to make. In my case, I use, number one, human data. And when I say human data, I look at patterns. For one, I know that since people have been working from home since last year and are forced to work from home, I know, number one, they are spending more time on screen time more than they've done previously. They're spending more time on their phones. They're spending more time on computers. They're spending more time online. And here's the thing. Even if they want to disconnect, they're getting pulled back in. And that's because they feel like they're not being productive. They're not making any contribution. Because why would they feel that they're making contribution if nobody's seeing them? And so there's this human need to always do something, because in a culture that we live in, the doing is what makes us valuable. So even if it's as simple as I'm going to respond to a Slack message just so that they know I'm here, right? And I'm just going to respond to that email. If it's 3 o'clock in the morning, they will just respond. And people sleep with their phones beside them. It's interesting. They will be on their beds, and so this kind of behavior is something that I already know based on working in operations for years and sleeping with my phone beside me, and you can't go to sleep, so you'll pick up your phone and then look at your emails and see whether or not you're getting monitoring messages from your systems. But going back to your question, with everything being remote, you have to learn a thing or two about how to properly talk to people, listen to people, below the surface. We're no longer having that face-to-face conversation with people. And so, somebody once said, AI and machine learning and automation and robotics are going to take over everything we're doing. I totally disagree, because if we keep becoming really good at being humans, we will never be replaced by any automation, and which is kind of ironic because automation is also my strong set of skills that I tend to automate.
I guess that leads, and that probably leads to the next question then, Mark, which I think is yours. So I won't jump in. Sorry.
Oh, is it? I thought it was yours actually, but I was just
is it mine?
Say,
it might be mine.
I think it is yours. I was going to say, just on that point about humans having to do things to prove themselves that they're of value. I don't know whether you've listened to too many of the previous podcasts, Edwin, but that's a common theme. I was thinking that Dave Rawle at Bytes was saying that just a few weeks ago, that he wants his people to think. He doesn't just want them to do. And that's kind of another way of saying what you were saying, Edwin. And it shouldn't surprise me, but the commonality between what our guests are saying always comes out, and that's quite interesting. I think it is your question, Geth.
I'll go with it anyway. It leads in nicely, and you're right. There's definitely a common theme. There's definitely a common theme coming. There's definitely a common theme coming through. Yeah. So I just had to. I don't know if you can hear my wife and a friend in the background, but I'm sat in my kitchen this week and recording from here. So I just asked her to be quiet because I couldn't hear over the talking. And now I think I'm going to be in the bad books. I'm only joking. So yeah, the next question then is all around data, and how, as a consultant, I guess you're a reasonably small outfit, so perhaps this doesn't apply to your business per se, but perhaps it more applies to the clients that you help. But how do you drive value from data and technology is really the question that we ask Ness, and I'm guessing from what you said already, you're on a cloud journey, but what are your thoughts on cloud tech, and do you recommend it to your clients?
Oh, that's a really, really good question. It's interesting. Every time a new technology would be introduced into the market, I remember going back into the days of moving into virtual machines. There were a lot of conversations around moving from physical to virtual, and then from virtual to the cloud. And then all of these things, people tend to look at, the next technology as the big thing. And so everybody now is pushing everyone on to the cloud, right? Yeah. And what a lot of people realize is that technology is really a reflection of humanity when you really do think about it. I say that because, number one, there's always this dividing line between, oh yeah, we're the purists. It's like Windows versus Linux, or cloud versus on-premise, or physical versus virtual, or, technology is really a reflection of our humanity, because unless you become hybrid, and I'm not talking about, somebody who is very well versed at everything. I'm talking about, learning how to become one with others. What I mean by this is, I use the story of how Microsoft really nailed it when you talk about Azure, GCP, or AWS. AWS and GCP both do not have an on-premises story. And what a lot of people think, oh yeah, Microsoft is forcing people to go to Azure. But what they don't realize is that Microsoft has mastered the art of hybrid. And what I mean by hybrid is, they know for a fact that they cannot move people from one tech to another tech in an instant. And so they can't really force everybody to move to the cloud, but they really have a great on-premises story, because that's how Microsoft started in the first place, all on-premises, right? And so they're at the center. They're the bridge between, yeah, you want to move some of your workloads to the cloud, sure. But you want to keep some of them on premises? Sure. We have a story between on-premises and the cloud. So they're not, well, a lot of people think, yeah, your Microsoft salespeople are forcing them to go to the cloud. And so there's no incentive to go on-premises. But here's the thing, which ties back to what I mentioned earlier about being hybrid. Learning how to put yourselves in the shoes of somebody else is what I mean by being hybrid. And Microsoft understands that new companies, startups, they'll be more than willing to go to the cloud. And that's okay, because we have something for you. Oh, traditional businesses who have stuff running on premises, yeah, we have something for you. They're right in the middle. And our jobs as technology professionals, right? Again, I know this is a long-winded way of saying, sure, people are moving to the cloud, but it's really not an argument whether you want to stick to on-premises versus moving to the cloud. It's really about you becoming the trusted advisor as a consultant, as a tech professional, to drive that conversation about what really is the value that you're contributing, which ties me back to, again, the conversation around, are we really arguing whether you want to move to the cloud or you want to stay on-prem? No. The value that we bring to the table is to be the guide. Sure, we move to the cloud, here are pros and cons, and I'm here to help. versus, no, let's move to the cloud because I just got certified on AWS, right? Totally different conversation, which ties back to your question earlier about the value, right? The things that we do as tech professionals can be done cheaper, more efficient. I don't want to say faster, because you can pick and choose. It can be done cheaper, that's for sure. I know for a fact it can be done cheaper. I come from Asia, and so you're outsourcing stuff. But what are the things that we can do that cannot be outsourced? That's thinking. We cannot outsource our thinking. We cannot outsource our creativity. We cannot outsource our humanity. And so the real value that every tech professional can bring to the table is enhancing how they think, enhancing their creativity, and enhancing their humanity. I forgot who mentioned earlier the difference between thinking and doing. The work that we do as tech people is, taking up so much of our time, 60 plus, 80 plus hour weeks, that we become human doings, not human beings. And that's preventing us from thinking. Even taking a break is looked down on in tech. Taking days off is looked down on. What we don't realize is that we're not machines, we're humans. And our productivity, our efficiency comes from the fact that we're humans. Now, not that we can do more, right? Yeah. Doing more is just a byproduct of the conditioning that we've had throughout the years that told us if you can do more, you're valuable. Not really, because I can do more of what anybody else can do, and I'm just a commodity.
Cool. Thank you. Thanks for that, Edwin. Go on, Mark. Sorry.
I was going to say I won't take too long. A huge amount of that resonates with me, Edwin. I mean, you said a load of stuff in there that. You talked about purists in one of your answers earlier, and Gethin and I had a client actually last year who they have for the same project they have a mix of on-prem solutions, Azure, and Dynamics software as a service. So we're hybriding all of those together. And the point I was going to make about that, I was going to use another example as well, but not enough time for that. Is people live in the real world. They don't live in this theoretical, this purist world. And people always come to me, they say, oh, you need to be using Agile for this. And I'm going, well, do you know what Agile means? No, not really. Okay, well, let's just live in the real world then, right? Let's do what you need to do to get the job done so you can go and have a beer or whatever it is you do, outside of work. So that a huge amount of that resonates with me. Shall I lead on to the next question, Guess?
Yeah.
Or do you want to take?
Well, go for it. We've got two left, I think. So one is the advice to the younger self, and one is the fun fact. So which one do you want to do this week, Mark? I always get to do the fun fact one. So do you want me to take the the
go on then. Let's do it the other way around.
All right, then. So we've got two questions left, Edwin. And these are the ones we like, actually. These are the ones we kind of build to. But what advice would you give your younger self, or somebody who is now starting out or changing their career to work in the IT industry?
That's a really interesting question. It took me years to really understand, why do people ask those crazy questions? It's like I could go back to my old self and tell myself, like, hey, don't do this. Like, we can't, but let's pretend that I'm going back to like 40 years ago. And yeah, I'm 40 plus. I don't look that, but let's pretend that I can go back. What would I tell myself? The one thing that I would tell myself that I'm still telling myself is be open to new ideas. And what I mean by be open to new ideas is not, I'm looking for the next best thing or I'm looking for the next big thing. No. Wisdom of the generations has, been generous to us to a point where we think in order to make a difference, we need to look at the next best thing, the next big thing, or the next great technology. What I've learned throughout the years is that you focus on the things that do not change because everything else will. And when you're looking for, the next best idea, the next big technology, people are so fixated on how does that work? Like, for instance, when Microsoft introduced Azure Arc with Kubernetes, like, how does that work? We forget the technology has been around for so long that the principles and the concepts do not change. The implementations do change, but the concepts don't, right? And what I have been telling myself ever since I realized that, nothing's really going to change, the fundamentals, the basics, is that I always go back to the basics. Not the latest, not the greatest. And I usually tell the story of how smart Microsoft is. Well, being a global leader in software, would attract a lot of really smart people. But the features they're introducing in the next release, the next version, the higher editions, were actually based on existing features, which means what I've learned in SQL Server 6.5, what I've learned in SQL Server 7 still applies today. But most people ignore the fact that, hey, you know something, you already know something. And so in order for you to adopt to the next big thing, the next best technology that you could ever think of, is not letting go of the fundamentals, is not letting go of the basics, is embracing more of the fundamentals and the basics, which again, it's really a general philosophy if you think about. We talk about business practices, we talk about principles like agile, for instance, we talk about all of these things. And what a lot of people don't realize, it's really all about becoming a better human being. Knowing how to communicate, knowing how to care for other people. What will, better DevOps practice do to your company if you don't even talk to each other because, we're better than you are? It's not going to help. It's going back to the basics is what I would tell my old self.
Cool.
Great advice. I like that. So just to finish up, then, Edwin, tell us. I mean, it's a bit of an odd question considering that you're in Canada and we're in the UK, right? But tell us, for whoever is listening, wherever they are in the world, tell us a fun fact about yourself that maybe nobody else knows, or something along those lines.
That it took me a while to really think about what is something that a lot of people don't know about me, and I'm not like most people who would post everything that they're doing on social media. I'm not that kind of person. And so there's so many things that a lot of people don't know about me. But one thing that they do know about me is I'm a musician. I'm a jazz piano player. And in my spare time, which happens to be almost every day, is I would sit down and play the piano. And, this is interestingly because, as tech professionals, in everything that we do, we become so logical that we forget to enjoy what we're doing. And so, fun fact about me is, I do play piano whenever I feel like it. But instead of really enjoying the music, I would like analyze everything that I do. And then, 45 minutes in, I would stop myself. Hey, can you just enjoy the music and stop analyzing what you're doing? And that's what I do on my spare time. Sometimes I play around with my music workstation where I create tracks for my own listening pleasure. They're not for sale, but something to really expand my creativity. Because again, one of the things that I bring to the table is the creativity, the thought process. And if I can enhance that in everything that I do, whether it's taking photos, playing music, or being creative in just about anything, just don't ask me to cook. I'm a really bad cook. But in just about anything, just apply that creativity and enhance that creativity, because it's not something that can easily be replaced by anything or anybody. Well,
I'll tell you something about Gethin's and my knowledge of each other and our relationship. So I said to Gethin when we started this podcast, we need some theme tune music for this podcast. I'll go and create some. Right, so I don't know whether you can see this, but there. There's a piano, right? I don't know if you can just see that on the webcam.
Which,
and that's being replaced with digital.
Which I believe is for sale. So get onto Facebook.
It is
get
for sale,
your bids in.
I'm curious now, why are you selling it?
It's being replaced with a digital piano soon. Anyway, so I said to Gethin, we need to get this. Need to get some theme tune music. And he said, "Yeah, okay, fair enough." He was humouring me, He's going, "Yeah, Mark, fine, get some music." So I used. This will mean nothing to Gethin. I used, probably means something to you, I hope. I used GarageBand, and I put a few things together with 3 very simple chords, and I let all the sequencers and arpeggiators and all that sort of thing do its stuff. And I played it again, and he said, "That's really good. Did you play all that yourself?" And I went, "Oh, yeah."
It's interesting you mentioned that, because it's exactly what I'm using to process the audio for my microphone right now.
Is it? Okay, that's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Yeah, the creativity of what I do, I want to make sure that, the creativity of anything that I do would flow into just about anything that I do. I stopped compartmentalizing my life to a point where, this is not just about playing music. This is about me taking the creativity that I built playing music into solving a tech problem. It's the creativity that I've learned solving tech problems into playing good music and taking photos. And it's about time that we become the best version of who we are, not compartmentalizing what we do because, this is work and this is life. Right? We just need to be more humans.
Well said.
Well said indeed. And I think that is probably a good point for us to call it a day. Edwin, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you very much for getting up early. You've been listening to the Putting the Human into Technology, Back into Technology podcast. I'm Gethin Ellis, and we've been joined today, Mark and I have been joined today by Edwin Sarmiento. Edwin, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. This has been a privilege. And if I may say, you have been doing great work.
Glad you like it.
Because we need more of this.
Thank you very much. That's very kind of you to say so.